So I just wanted to quickly mention what our kind of zero carbon aspiration is. So in our climate change strategy, when we produced that back in 2016, we set an aspiration for Cambridge to be net zero carbon by 2050. But we then declared a climate emergency in February of this year, and as part of that we called upon government, industry and regulators to make the changes needed to reach net zero carbon by 2030. But I should say that we take climate change and the climate emergency very seriously, and clearly we would want to work towards net zero carbon by as soon a date as possible. Just by way of a bit of context, emissions in Cambridge have been reducing over the past 12 years. So the graph there shows sort of total emissions from the city. It shows that emissions have reduced by just over 30% in that period. But clearly, if we're going to hit zero carbon by any date, they would need to reduce at a much more kind of rapid rate than they have been to date. So moving on to the City Council and what we've been doing. So we set a target in our climate change strategy to reduce our own emissions, so from our buildings and our vehicle fleet mainly, by between 15 and 20% by 2020-21, from a baseline in 2014-15. And we have already seen our emissions fall by just over 25% by 2018-19. So we've reached the target with sort of 2 years to go, but we are still looking and still pushing to go sort of beyond that. I included this chart just to give a sense of where we were and where we are now. So our total emissions were just over 8,000 tonnes of CO2 per year in 2014-15, and that reduced by a quarter to just over 6,000 in 2018-19. What have we done as a City Council to try and reduce our emissions? So we have had a carbon management plan which sets out 71 different projects over the 5-year period to try and reduce our emissions. And over a period of time we've had a dedicated fund called the Climate Change Fund, and we've invested around £1.5 million in projects since 2008 to try and reduce our emissions. I wanted to include this chart essentially because we've tried to take a sort of strategic approach to our emissions. Our latest data from 2018-19 shows that the swimming pools that the council provides in the city account for just over a quarter of our emissions. Almost a quarter of our emissions comes from our vehicle fleet, and then a significant proportion comes from sheltered housing, our office buildings, and the car parks that we provide in the city centre. I'll just give you a quick flavour of some of the things that we've done. We've invested quite heavily in renewable energy. So we've recently installed solar PV panels at our main office sites, at the swimming pools because they're such a high energy user, and then also at sheltered housing and community centres. And we also have a solar thermal system that is using solar energy to heat the pool water and also the showers at Abbey Pool. We've also tried to upgrade our heating and lighting systems. So it might not sound like rocket science, but we've had a programme of investing in LED lighting across our estate. So again, in our office buildings like this one, Mandela House, but also particularly in our car parks. We had a project a couple of years ago to install LED lighting at the Grand Arcade car park, and that was very successful in that it reduced our energy usage and our emissions from that particular facility by 50%. And more recently, we've been looking at, I suppose, kind of whole building solutions. So we've particularly looked at the Guildhall and what can be done to make it more energy efficient. And there's been a range of kind of energy efficiency and heating measures, like a building energy management system, that is hopefully making this building a lot more efficient than it once was. Our vehicle fleet accounts for almost a quarter of our emissions, So we've been kind of incrementally investing in electric vehicles. So we now have 10 electric vehicles, but I think we found that currently the market doesn't necessarily meet all of our needs. So I've included a photo of a recycling lorry. There are kind of options on the market, but they're significantly more expensive when it comes to refuse vehicles and more limited in range. But over time, you would expect the technology to make that more viable. We are carrying out a more thorough fleet review, how we could move to a fully electric fleet in time. We've talked about our carbon management plan, which focuses on our estate, but we also have a wider climate change strategy that covers the same period from 2016 to 2021, and that focuses primarily on energy efficiency from buildings in the city, sustainable transport and waste. So sort of picking up on the three areas of local action that Owen highlighted at the end of his presentation. I'll try and highlight some of the things that we're doing to support residents and businesses. So in terms of buildings, we've invested over a number of years in the energy efficiency of council homes, and Emma has produced a sustainable housing design guide which sets standards that are higher than national building regulations, and we're applying that to all the 500 new council homes that are currently being built over the next few years. We have also tried to support private residents to improve the energy efficiency of their properties. So we were successful, Joe's team was successful in securing £2 million in funding from the Green Deal to retrofit more than 400 properties in the city. But as was highlighted in the previous discussion, the sort of funding gap is problematic in terms of future action. And lastly, in terms of buildings, planning policy is key. As part of our kind of new local plan, we're using the standard setting, the sustainable housing design guide that I mentioned earlier. So really trying to make sure that new housing development is as sustainable as it can be. In terms of transport, we're a member of the Greater Cambridge Partnership. I've included a picture of an electric vehicle there. So Joe was successful in securing over £400,000 in funding from the Office for Low Emission Vehicles, which is a government body, to install 20 rapid chargers for electric taxis by 2020, and that sort of goes hand in hand with our sort of licensing policy, where we're requiring all taxis to be electric by 2028. Is that the date?
Yeah.
But we recognise that taxis are only one part of the picture. So recently we produced an electric vehicle strategy, which includes other measures that we are responsible for as a council, so things like exploring opportunities for more EV charging in our car parks, using planning policy to secure electric vehicle charging in new developments, but also recognising that we need to work in partnership with partners like the County Council, who would lead on on-street charging, and also with businesses and organisations around the city in terms of workplace parking and charging. And lastly, just quickly to mention sort of waste was the third area that Owen highlighted. Our shared waste service carries out lots of campaigns, media campaigns, recycling champions to try and sort of increase that rate towards the sort of higher levels that Owen was talking about. So lastly, I just wanted to lead you sort of feeding into the next discussion with this kind of pie chart. Half of our emissions come from industry in the city, so that incorporates businesses, the education sector, the public sector. So I think what I wanted to the thought I wanted to leave you with is really that we do all need to work together collaboratively as organisations, given that profile, to try and reduce our emissions if we're to get to zero carbon.